So who the hell am I? My name's Amanda. I've been in the content marketing world for about 10 years, mostly from an SEO perspective. So I come at this from an organic perspective. Paid certainly has its place. Love the paid folks out there. It's just not my expertise. And I've been talking about content, authority building, link earning for a while now. And that's what I want to dive into with you all today. I will have time for questions at the end as well, because I know that a lot of things tend to come up around this topic, and I'd love to chat with you. So let's look at this very plainly. It's funny on this. I don't know if it looks, I don't know why those got so gigantic. Building links is focused on the result, the end game, and not how you're getting there. Right? If you're just thinking, I need to build the links, you're thinking about the results, you earn the links, or you get the links, but you're not really thinking about what you provided to your potential customers, your audience, in order to achieve that. Means you're not really providing a lot of value. And typically you can get some results from that. I'm not saying that it's useless. It's just that they don't tend to meaningfully last for a long period of time. You're not getting as many of them probably, and they're probably not as high quality. So if you're earning them, you're focused on that value that you're generating. And as a result, when you have that mindset shift, you tend to you tend to earn better links, ultimately, which is kind of the irony of the whole thing. So when you build one link, your best case scenario is you built a link to a page you're trying to rank for, and you do see a boost. Maybe it was a pretty decent link, and you see a rise in the SERPs, the search engine result pages. Awesome. Not trying to discourage you from doing that. That's great. But if you're earning a link and it is a higher authority link, if it's more respected, and you're doing this at scale because you're creating a piece of content that's more likely to earn several links rather than kind of out there hustling to get every single link that you can, you tend to see a longer lasting impact of that. Because not only are you earning the links, you're starting to earn trust with people and with Google as a result. Because you're creating something that people want to link to. You're creating something that people want to read. Because the reality is there's somebody who will do it cheaper if you just go after this trying to find the least expensive way to accomplish your goals. Like I said, I get pitched constantly, like, give us $30 and we'll find you a link somewhere. I'm like, okay, like probably you could, but that's not really what I'm trying to do here. So I'm skipping the polls today. We're going to just do questions at the end. How to earn links. If you're somewhat bought into what I'm talking about, and I'm sure some of you are, the big question is, how do you do this? Because it's not really straightforward and easy, unfortunately. I wish it were. I'm just going to give you some perspective of a little bit more of where I'm coming from with this. So I work at a company called Stacker. Stacker is a newswire, similar to like the AP or Reuters, and that we create stories, we create articles, and then we syndicate them out to news sites all over the country. We're a little different in that we give them for free. So any site can pick up our stories, but it's completely up to them. They don't have to. They don't pay for it. It's just kind of content out there for the world. But we also have a brand partnership arm that helps to fund that. So we partner with brands, we create content on their behalf, and we syndicate it out to our network. So it's earned syndication rather than paid syndication, which is pretty common, right? There's like the PR newswires of the world, or like press releases you can send out. You pay to have your press release sent out, but usually it's like a sponsored link or a no follow link or whatever it is. So I'm coming from the realm of do follow links from earned media. Before this, I was agency side, creating content, and there was a team of people who were manually pitching it. So some of you might be in that world too. That's the world I come from, and that's the perspective that I'm providing. So throughout my career, it's all been about newsworthiness. My degree was in journalism, and I immediately abandoned journalism and went to marketing because that was like the age of Penguin and Panda, and all companies ever were hiring writers out of college en masse. So I ended up in this industry, and I learned that knowing what was newsworthy was actually extremely helpful to me and all the companies that I worked for. I could do like a whole separate presentation on all the different elements of newsworthiness, but I will start with just saying that the benefits are massive from a marketing or SEO perspective, more than you might have realized. Like I said, you're getting the higher quality pickups from news sites if you're creating something that's actually newsworthy. Your brand authority improves because you're not just providing opinion, you're providing something that's probably rooted in some sort of fact, hopefully, and people start to trust you more, and then you start to earn the links as a result. And even though there's so many different elements of newsworthiness, these 3 things I think are the best items for me to focus on today for you all, because I see them come up again and again in terms of brands creating content that they're able to get media coverage for. So if you want to chat later about like other elements of newsworthiness, would love to. I'm giving a whole presentation next week that focuses on localized content. So if that's of interest to you, let me know. But these 3 things I think are the most important. So tangential content, what the hell is that? Tangential is basically the other side of the spectrum in terms of topical. So topical being like, this is how you use our product. This is who we are as a company. Things that are very on brand for you. You have that content, hopefully, bottom of the funnel content. You need to provide those case studies. You need to tell people why they should pay for your product or service, right? So your product or service, your company culture, if it's like a piece about your CEO or about how you got funding or whatever, that's topical. Today, we're talking about tangential, because in reality, you're going to get some coverage for stuff like that, but it's going to go very quickly. People are going to stop caring immediately because it's going to sound like an ad. That's a different part of marketing when you start talking about, we're awesome, and we're going to keep telling you why we're awesome. It's like, okay, like show us why you're awesome. Stop just telling me. Tangential is a way of zooming out a little bit and providing something that's not directly tied to your offering. And the value of doing this, a lot of people kind of hesitate to do this, and I get it, because it doesn't like lead to conversions. It's not designed to do what some other content is designed to do. However, if we're talking about a goal being link earning, or a goal being earning media attention, or building authority for your brand, trending this way can be extremely beneficial. So tangential content is probably more about your broader industry. It could include other challenges that your audience has that you don't personally solve, which I know that like feels a little bizarre. And it could be more appealing to a general audience, because if you want like a major news site to talk about you, if you're only speaking to, you know, a niche group of 25 people in Minnesota, that's not going to be enough to get picked up somewhere, right? Like they're going to say, this doesn't really appeal to our audience en masse. We're not going to run this. So again, this has a very specific objective, but it can be really valuable. So what you should be creating is this overlap between some of these newsworthy elements and your brand's overall mission. I don't mean like your very specific mission of like what your product or service offers, but as a company, why do you exist in general? What are you hoping to do for your industry? Just thinking a little more broadly about the impact that you want to have. And I think I'm talking about Google, like earning trust with search engines, but I think as a consumer, or whether I'm like looking to hire an agency or whatever it is, if somebody is producing something that's not related to their product or service, and I find it really valuable, that still speaks to me. That says they're actually investing time and money in helping me in other ways. And that can be really powerful. That sends a signal to me that, oh, they actually care, which if you're able to reach that level above your competitors, that can help you increase conversions. It's just a little harder to track, right? So a few questions. These are actually going to tie into everything else I talk about. So this is a good kind of accidental summary slide. But thinking how you can be of service to your audience in a more general way. So hopefully you have that bottom of the funnel content already. But thinking, what are some other problems? Like if I'm talking to my customers or my clients and they're talking about some other thing that's bothering them, or that they're curious about, or maybe there's something you're curious about but have never had the answer, seek out that answer. Publish your results. Somebody will find that really interesting, hopefully, if you did a good job, and we'll cover it. We're going to talk also about contextualizing, but this is a great way to go tangential as well. Thinking broadly about what is the context of a topic I'm always talking about, what is the history of that topic, and then we're also going to talk about what data can you analyze or present in a broader sense. So a lot of this overlaps, which is great, because the more of these elements you have, the more likely you are to get the media coverage at all. So let's look at some actual examples, because if you're like me, this is all very nebulous to just talk about newsworthy content and yada yada and not see how it actually works. So I'm going to use one of our brand partners, PIN. They are a communications SaaS. So this piece, 10 aspects of remote work employers and employees disagree on. So they're a communications company, like an internal work communications. This isn't specifically about work communications, right? That would be their topical side. They're going to talk about, you should work with PIN because we're awesome. We're going to help your company, all of your employees communicate better. We're going to make you more efficient. That's all topical, bottom of the funnel stuff. But we're not getting so far off that we're talking about like pet insurance or something completely irrelevant for them to try to earn links, right? We're just zooming out a little bit. If you think about employee communications, there's a lot. If you zoom out, you're thinking about your work culture, probably, or just anything about the workplace. So we took something that was a little more general, remote work, and we ran with that. It still makes more sense for them to be talking about it, but it appeals to a more general readership. Because whether you are remote working or not, I'm sure you've seen these on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. It's like every other story is about remote work. You see these stories out there a lot because there's a lot of debate about the effectiveness of it, and we were trying to figure out a new perspective to provide. So when you're able to do something like that, you get pickups from sites like the Chicago Tribune and the Baltimore Sun and the New York Daily News because it appeals to a much bigger group of people than anybody who's specifically looking to onboard a new partner from their employee communications, right? Because the goal here is to build broader brand authority and start earning links. Okay, so tangential content is one core tenet of this. Let's talk about data, because if I were to pick two things, it would be these two things, especially if you're doing this for the first time. Data is kind of the shortcut, because if you're using data as the core of the information that you're providing, it almost inherently tells an original story unless somebody's analyzed it in the exact same way as you. It tends to unveil interesting trends because data that's comprehensive covers a long period of time, various areas, if it's a comprehensive data set. It can often help you do the next step in this, which is add context, which we'll talk about. I mentioned that I talk a lot about localization. Data helps you break things down locally. You can look at things in every state. I'm from Florida. I can't help but look at any story about Florida because I know it's going to be absolute chaos when I click on it. But I care more about that than I do about something happening in Montana just because I've never been there, or something even generally. You want to know what's happening here. I mean, we read DCist or Washingtonian or whatever because we care about what's happening here, right? So data can help you very easily do that for many people in all various areas, rather than just saying, I'm only going to write about DC or I'm only going to write about nationally. I can provide this data for every state or even every zip code in some situations and localize it for those audiences. But most importantly, data adds immediate credibility. And what you're trying to do with creating this content is earn that credibility very quickly. I'm snapping a lot. That's like my vibe today. I don't know. I don't usually do that. You get immediate credibility because, especially now, I think I just saw a Gallup poll that said this is the second worst year, or 2021 was the second worst year for trust in media in this country. People don't want to read several paragraphs about why they should trust you. They should just see the headline and feel like, okay, I'm bought into this. However they did this makes sense to me. And you don't want to be really struggling to earn that initial trust. So data does all of this inherently, which is why I think it's kind of a shortcut, even though it's not a shortcut, but it feels like one. It's so valuable. If you're not doing this, the good news is that there's a ton of government data that you might have thought wasn't relevant to you, but when you think more tangentially, it probably is. There's a ton of it. It covers all kinds of interesting topics. A lot of the stories we create at Stacker are based on government data. So I encourage you to dig around, because things are, in some cases, like for census, things are released every week. So if you're the first one to see that and write something interesting on it, that's awesome. And I always say that people aren't hanging out on government sites trolling through these data sets that are released. Like, we don't do that. So if you do that and you analyze it and you visualize it in an interesting way, you're way ahead of the game. So let's look at another example. Same company, The most important well-being programs, comma, according to workers. So already, even if you don't know that this is data, which it's based on a study, you know who it's based on. It's not somebody's opinion, right? It's not like your company just making this list based on nothing, based on the person who wrote it. It already implies, no, there's actually a methodology at play here. So click this and you will be provided with that methodology and you can trust this. We've done this in various ways. You can literally just say, according to census data, you can say, according to a survey of 1,000 people, whatever it is. Putting it right in the headline is actually a pretty good tactic. Because like I said, every step somebody has to take to earn your trust decreases the chances of success. Tell them right up front. Why should they click on it? Why should they read it? Why should they open your email pitch to them, right? You did something involving data and you put it right in the headline to make that very clear. And again, we're able to get pickups like on the Houston Chronicle and MSN because well-being programs for employees apply to a lot of people, and it's interesting to get it from the worker's point of view rather than companies maybe talking about this. Like, oh, here are the programs we provide to our employees. Great. I mean, sure, I'm probably talking it up a little bit. I want to hear what employees have to say, what they want, and we can all leverage that at our companies, right? But it's a different perspective. I'm running through this, so there will be time for questions. Thirdly, contextualizing. What is the history of the topic? Now, this can get really dry if you don't do it the right way, so we'll talk about that. It's not always going to apply. There's probably a timeline for everything on Earth at this point, but there are some times when it's extremely appropriate and adds actual value, and I don't think that should be overlooked. How does your topic compare to similar things? And how does it compare to different things? So again, this isn't extremely helpful without an example. So let's say we're talking about starting a business. So we're getting really broad again. We're tangential. We're saying, okay, we're not going to talk about employee communications. We're going to go as early as people starting a business. And we're going to ask ourselves, what is the history of this? How much did it cost to start a certain kind of business 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, as it does today, right? Like, how difficult is it for new business owners now? That context, that historical context, paints a different picture than just saying how much it costs now, right? You need that context. In a vacuum, some numbers don't really mean anything. How does it compare to similar things? How much does it cost to start a business in one industry versus another? How much does it cost to start a boutique store in your neighborhood versus a construction company? How much does it, like there's a million kind of comparisons you can make among similar things. You're still talking about starting a business. You're talking about different kinds of businesses. And then how does it compare to different things? This is where things get really fascinating. You can compare the costs of starting a business to student loans for business school, right? Those aren't the same things, but they're relevant to one another. They paint a broader picture. They make a statement about, is it worth it to go to business school? How long does it take for you to make that money back? Whatever it is. So this is just like a Post-it note you can have on your desk to remind you, like, okay, I have a topic. Let's think about, is there any context I can add to this topic to really bring that number home? An example I have in another presentation is we had a story, I think it was like 1 in 3, I forgot what professional type, I forgot what worker, but like was going hungry. And to say a straight number would be a lot, but to hear 1 in 3 means something very different to us. We can see that, we can feel that. 1 in 3, that's a lot of people. Because we probably don't know the total number of workers of a certain industry, but we do know what 1 in 3 is. So context can be extremely powerful. It should be utilized not only for your ideation for coming up with content ideas, but again, in that example that I just gave you verbally, it's in the headline. You can, every aspect, if it's in the subject line of your pitch email, if you're trying to pitch somebody to cover something you're doing, all these different elements can be applied in every stage of content creation and promotion. So we're back to remote work. This was just so trendy in the last year or so. But this time we asked different generations how they feel about it. Or I don't know, I don't think we asked, we use another data set. But how different generations feel about it. So you can have data about the general public and their feelings about remote work. You can talk to random CEOs, you can talk to random employees, you can get some interesting stories, anecdotal information, and more general trends. But then when you break it down by generation, it does add some interesting context. Maybe people who have been working remotely for a longer period of time are more okay with it than people who haven't. And you can click on this story and see that kind of breakdown. The other benefit to this contextualizing end data is people want to see themselves in your content. The more you're able to break it down demographically or add that context like we're doing here with different age groups, you're able to open that and say, I know where I technically, statistically fit in here. Do I agree or disagree with this? But now you kind of know where you lie in these different buckets. It's the same with localization. If you're looking at a map of data, you immediately will go to where you live or like grew up. You want to see yourself in the information that's being presented. So data is great for that, and context is great for that. Again, SFGate, all kinds of publications in various states are picking this up because it's relevant to a wide audience and provides a context about remote work that has not really been talked about yet. It's just showing the different generations and how their opinions differ from one another. I wanted to show this. This is a little bit of a pivot, but I think it's a very important point. I mentioned that we're a newswire. We have access to communications with a lot of our publishing partners, a lot of these news sites that tell us what they want. They give us feedback. They say, we love this story, send us more like this. And this was a quote we got from a small news site, the Auburn Examiner. And what was interesting to me, and why I want to show marketers this, is that when it comes to link earning, we can create all this awesome content that's tangential, data-driven, contextualized, but we have to be thinking about not just our audience, the audience of the site that we're trying to pitch to either write about this or link to it, right? That's the step almost everybody skips. And if you don't do that, your promotion, your pitching is going to be terrible. The content you create might not be right. And this was so interesting to me because we send these stories to news sites and we kind of assume like, yeah, I mean, they want more traffic. They want more engagement. That helps them focus on the stories they really want to tell. They don't have to be as worried. Like we're sending them pretty engaging stories that'll get the clicks. This was an even deeper viewpoint. It was not only does this story help us just get some traffic, it elevates other stories we've created that are similar in topic. So maybe there is like a really hard-hitting news story that they did, and our more featurey, data-driven piece brought that back up, made it relevant again. They could link as a related article to it again. They can reopen the conversation. We're not always thinking about that kind of stuff when we have a task of, you need more links this quarter. You have to be thinking of who you're targeting and who they're creating content for and what their objectives are. In this case, it's not just to get engagement. It's also, hey, this is a really important topic to our audience. So the fact that you're helping and contextualizing and providing a new viewpoint is going to allow us to leverage stories we've already told. And that's an extreme benefit to them. So I'm just providing this as an example. It's not always going to be this with whoever you're pitching, but I challenge you the next time you're planning on emailing somebody and want to partner with them or want them to cover your story, to think what is in it for them, but very specifically, what do you think is in it for them? And then ask them what's in it for them. Like, what are you hoping to get out of this? Especially if it's like a partnership. What are you hoping to get out of this? What would be a success to you? If you're pitching content, then you're hoping that they're going to find it super entertaining to their audience, that they're going to hit their quotas of visitors or whatever it is, right? So think about that throughout this entire process. That is really crucial. Okay, so what does all of this mean? Like, why are we doing this? We're earning the links. This is where we're going to get a little deeper into the SEO side of stuff, because I'll show you how we track the success of initiatives like this. And it's very strategic in how we track it, because earning links doesn't immediately lead to companies' growth, right? It's just anybody who's on the organic side, we're all repeating the same refrain. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes several months. We're telling our boss, we're telling our clients. but I'll show you how we do it. This is an example of the top level results for that brand partner I mentioned, Pin. So I think this was based on like 6 to 8 stories we did for them. It got picked up 1,300 times across various news sites. And because it's news sites, the domain rating, I don't know whether you use domain rating from Ahrefs or domain authority from Moz, whatever your metric we use, domain rating, is pretty high on average because they're news sites. Even if they're local, they're often overlooked, by the way. Local news sites, often overlooked, even though they're very respected in their communities. The effective cost per link, effective being the key, I would like circle it 10 times. This is for the people who are used to thinking about links in terms of dollar amounts. Don't encourage that, but if you need that, effective cost per link is $23, which again, wild. So you get this, and this is awesome. You can report on this, but usually you need more than this. For anybody at your company who needs to find out or understand how this leads to organic growth, and that's really the point of this presentation, is not only to explain how to earn links, but why does that lead to organic growth, and how you can tell that story either to your clients or to your boss, right? Or somebody else, another stakeholder to your company who doesn't understand why you're investing in this. So this is, again, from my particular perspective, we create the story in the Stacker newsroom. It goes on our brand partner site. It is syndicated out, and the links and the canonicals, which is telling Google this is not duplicate content, here's the original source, is all pointing back at the client site. The step here that I haven't mentioned at all yet, and again, could be a whole separate presentation, is internal linking being a huge asset to this as well. Because if you're taking all that link equity that you're earning to this page that you created great content on, and you link to other strategic pages on your site, you can start distributing that link equity and track those pages to see if they increase their rankings. So this is a lot in one slide, but if you're doing more manual pitching, it's very similar to this. If you've created a piece of content and you're pitching it to journalists or whomever, and you want them to link to that, you can take it a step further and think, what should I link to on my site from this page to transfer some of that authority that I'm earning? It should be natural if you can make it natural. That's what we're talking about today. It's like, how does this all actually feel earned and natural? But you need to think about it. It's a waste if you don't consider the internal linking ramifications. So I showed you the raw numbers. You can also be tracking, I think these are all Ahrefs graphs, the increase in your referring domains over time, right? So we started working with this brand in August. You see immediately there's an uptick in referring domains. Great. That means step 1 is working. We're earning the links. That's the first thing. This part is hard. If you have an internal link earning program, digital PR program, content program, even this part can be very difficult at scale. But once you get this, you're still not done with reporting or understanding the impact of this work on your business. You might start seeing your domain rating increase. This can also translate into Google feeling like you're more of an authority because you're producing high authority content, expert content, valuable content. It's also because you're earning better links to your sites. And that's one of the ways that Google's assessing whether you're an authority. And it's also actual people who see your content out in the world and might start clicking on your results more when they see them in the SERPs, right? There's a lot that goes into this. The caveat to domain rating and why it's not perfect because it's a proxy metric. This doesn't come from Google. It comes from Moz, Ahrefs, SEMrush, whatever it is, to try to gauge how Google feels about you. But also, if you're at a 70, since it's logarithmic, if you're at a 70 domain rating, doing this is not going to get you to an 80 in even a few months. It gets much harder the higher you're authoritative already. But if you're like Pin and you were like hanging out in the 30s, this is a very quick way to scale up your authority. So that's the caveat here. If you're at a brand where you're already respected, you're a household name, this isn't going to skyrocket your domain rating. But for most other folks, you will start to see an improvement over time. So this is something we keep an eye on. As we're earning these links, we're asking ourselves, is the overall authority improving? And there's other ways to check that too. You can check brand awareness by seeing if there's an increase in brand mentions in search, or however you want to check the authority of your site. Ask your customers or clients if they've seen your content out in the world, whatever it is. Then, if you have done this internal linking and you are driving all of these links and authority to your site, the ideal situation and what you're aiming for is that your rankings start to improve. That's ultimately, people earn links to increase their traffic, right? But there's the in-between in that equation is this, that your organic pages, that the pages on your site improve their rankings in the search result pages, right? Because how are you increasing your organic traffic if not for this? There might be some additional interest, but we're talking about more top of the funnel content. We're not talking about bottom of the funnel. So it's probably not that people just are now all super aware of you and understand everything about you and are ready to convert and are Googling your name. But more so that because you're driving all this authority to your sites, you're seeing your pages start to rank, the rankings start to improve. And again, if you're using internal linking, you can target those specific sites that you're sending those links to and that authority to and see if it's working. Okay, we picked this page as the one that we're going to link to, have its rankings improved. So this is also what we're tracking over the coming months. And then finally, see how much later this part is? The organic traffic. So after you've earned the links, your overall authority goes up, your pages start to improve in their rankings. Finally, as a result of all of that, your organic traffic starts to go up. It's a lot of work, but it's sustainable and it's earned and it lasts. If you keep doing it, it's an investment, but if you keep doing it, you will see this improvement in organic search and various ways that this kind of can permeate your marketing strategy. I don't even talk about how if you're creating really high value content for this goal, it can be repurposed in a myriad of ways. You can be sending it to your email list. You can be sharing it on social. I mean, plenty of other ways to also additionally measure the value of this. But at the end of the day, if you're doing it in the first place, this is probably what you're looking for. And it's very powerful to point to a chart where your organic traffic is trending up over months and months. And you say, hey, I know it doesn't make, maybe to people who don't work in SEO, I don't understand why we're putting so much money into creating content for links and not putting so much money in creating content to convert. They're not mutually exclusive. You should do both. But this is why. Because if you've set up that awesome bottom of the funnel content and you know that you have a high conversion rate and you're able to close these deals that are coming to your site, you need to drive more relevant people to your site. And that's how the way you do that is to increase your rankings. So this is the last slide, and it's kind of a caveat. When we're talking about this, I kind of alluded to it already. This is one piece of what I think is a 3-tiered strategy. I've worked with clients in the past who come for the links and they didn't have these other 2 elements ready to go, and they did not get the results that they wanted as a result. And frankly, we probably shouldn't have worked with them, because if your technical SEO on your site is not sound, if it's not really queued up for Google to understand and crawl correctly and for users to understand, then you're not going to get the full benefit of this work. If you're on-site content, like I mentioned, if you have great bottom of the funnel content and you already have a great content engine, you're going to be really well set up for this. But if you don't, if you're still in that stage and you're like, I don't know, we don't really rank, we're not really ranking for anything in organic search, or we need to really invest in that, do that first. Because when you start earning links at scale, you'll see the massive impact only if these other 2 things are ready to go. And you can do them simultaneously, on-site content and link earning. They don't have to necessarily be completely separate. You can overlap them. But you want to be having some pages in your mind that you're trying to increase the rankings of, that have already proven to work. Because if you're driving to all this traffic and stuff to pages that are like, they're okay, you're kind of wasting the value, right? So I feel like I talked forever, but there's still a little bit of time because we started early. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions any of you have. Oh, I was like, where's the cube? Where's the cube?
We're ready.
Does anyone have questions? Not one? I'm shocked. One. Okay.
how is the domain rating rated?
Yeah.
How is that determined?
Yeah, so a lot of these, that's a great question. And like all of these SEO tools have their own version of it, and they don't tell you, it's just like Google. It's like they're not going to tell you exactly how they do it all the time, but they're just doing it as like a proxy. They're probably looking at a lot of the same things that we look at as SEOs. So they're looking at how many links you have to your site, the content on your site. They're basically trying to do the same thing Google's doing, but making their version public. So I wouldn't worry. You're really not worrying about like the base number you started with. You're trying to see the improvement. You pick one of them. So if you're picking domain rating on Ahrefs, for example, you want to see improvement there. That number is going to be very different from what Moz produces, as an example. But don't fret over that. Just pick one and see if you start to improve, because they're tracking the same stuff. Like their tools are going to be using, like, if you're driving links to your site, the quality of those links, whatever. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I know that's not like the best answer, but I can pull up either of those specific ones and see what they have written about it. But on the top level, they're just trying to do the same thing that Google's doing on like a lesser scale. They're trying to get a sense of, okay, you have these great links and your brand's already pretty authoritative and you're creating really great content. Google probably thinks you're like around here. So they're kind of just guessing with data.
I have a question. I would say we would be fairly new to doing this. I work for an association, a nonprofit. We have Google Analytics, but like what other tools would you recommend for beginners, I would say?
So Google Analytics is great. If you're trying to get into the link, like massive link earning side, people usually use Ahrefs is a big one. But Moz and SEMrush as well.
And when you say Ahrefs, like
Ahrefs, yeah, great
I might just spell it out. Yeah, thank you.
It's a play on the code for a link. You know, it's like Ahref equals whatever. That's why it's called that. Yeah, Ahref. Now it costs money, so this is not like if you're just dabbling in it. You know, you can track that stuff otherwise. But if you're like, yes, this is going to become a key like strategic initiative for us, one of those tools is probably necessary.